Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Billy Wilder Theater. I'm Claudia Bester. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Hammer Museum. Happy summer. I'm very excited to welcome you all to our opening night of our Summer Night Cinema series, 50 Years of Hip Hop, with tonight's screening of This Is the Life. And you know what? It is the life. As many of you know, in 2023, we're celebrating the birth of hip hop, which is said to have started at a house party DJ'd by DJ Kool Herc in the Bronx on August 11th, 1973, during which he invented breakbeats with 2 turntables and a microphone. Hip-hop exploded into one of the most popular forms of music, but also one of the most influential art forms of the century, with a global influence on language, poetry, dance, education, technology, communication, and politics, as well as music, fashion, art, and entertainment. Here at the Hammer, we decided to celebrate hip-hop with 6 nights of film, curated by critic Ernest Hardy. And we're grateful to our sponsors, Carla Emile and Rich Silverstein, for making Summer Night Cinema possible. Tonight's the first night of the series with director Ava DuVernay's 2008 documentary, This Is the Life, about the Los Angeles health food market and cafe, The Good Life, in Leimert Park, where their open mic nights incubated a generation of rappers, some of whom may or may not be here tonight. On Tuesday, June 20th, we'll screen Hype Williams' 1998 film Belly, followed by Ernest Dickerson's Juice on June 27th, and then Bastards of the Party on August 2nd, Brown Sugar on August 8th, and finally a kind of special double feature we're calling Planet Rocker, Showstopper, Flow Dropper, Beat Scholar, with a tribute to the visionary music and music videos of Missy Elliott, plus a screening of Ava DuVernay's documentary My Mic Sounds Nice, The Truth About Women in Hip Hop on August 15th. And all of our screenings are free, and I hope you will come back for all of them. It's a great way to spend your summer. Our hip-hop series curator, Ernest Hardy, is going to say a little bit about the birth of hip-hop and about This Is the Life, and then we're going to play the film. Ernest's criticism has appeared in the New York Times, The Village Voice, Vibe, Rolling Stone, the LA Times, and the LA Weekly. He's a contributor to the reference books 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die and classic material, The Hip Hop Album Guide. His collection of criticism, Blood Beats Volume 1, Demos, Remixes, and Extended Versions, was a recipient of the 2007 Pen Beyond Margins Award. Blood Beats Volume 2, The Bootleg Joints, was published in February 2008. Ernest was a juror for the Sundance Film Festival, the San Francisco International Film Festival, the Palm Springs International Short Film Festival, Los Angeles Outfest, and the LA Film Festival, and co-programmed the Fusion Film Festival in Los Angeles. He's profiled Jordan Peele, Barry Jenkins, and Ryan Coogler for Written By Magazine, and written liner notes for Chuck D Presents Louder Than a Bomb, Curtis Mayfield Gospel, Chet Baker Career 1952 to 1988, and the box sets Love Luther and Say It Loud, A Celebration of Black Music in America, and Superstars of 70s Soul, among others. Ernest co-edited the literary anthology War Diaries, which was published in 2011. His short story, Cold and Wet, Tired You Bet, appeared in Best Gay Stories 2011, and 2 of his poems appear in the anthology Black Gay Genius on Joseph Beam and In the Life in 2015. Ernest currently teaches in the Critical Studies Department at CalArts, and his forthcoming collection of short stories will be published by Writ Large Press. Ernest is the co-curator of the Hammer Museum's Black Book series, and he also curated and hosted a John Singleton series for us when Singleton died suddenly in 2019, and a Barry Jenkins retrospective for us in 2020. So now please join me in welcoming the wonderful Ernest Hardy.
First, can you hear me? Good, good. First, I want to thank all of you for coming out. All of us, me, Claudia, the amazing Hammer team, really appreciate you joining us this evening, and we hope to see you for the rest of the series. A special thanks to you, those of you who are still masking up. When I was first approached to curate the program, I was excited but also incredibly overwhelmed. There are so many ways to go. Blaxploitation films that inspired so much hip-hop culture, films like CB4, Fear of a Black Hat, and Don't Be a Menace to South Central While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood, which all poked fun at the cliches around the music and culture. There was also the option of doing a whole program of documentaries. The only thing I knew for certain is that I wanted to include the tribute to Missy Elliott that Claudia and I have been talking about for many, many years. Ultimately, I took my cue from the fact that we're in Los Angeles, and I wanted the city itself to be the organizing principle of this whole endeavor, while putting together a program that embraced films whose subject matter and style also stretch beyond LA. It was a no-brainer to have This Is the Life be the opening night film. Directed and produced by Ava DuVernay, it's a film whose importance only increases every year. It documents a movement within hip-hop that was not only important locally, but that had global impact, yet is paradoxically unsung in so many critical and scholarly accounts of hip-hop, including those accounts of West Coast hip-hop. I'll talk more about This Is the Life in a moment. Belly made the cut because director Hype Williams, a hip-hop legend for his classic music videos, tapped into a gorgeous fever dream of visual artistry to craft his film. And though critics were lukewarm to it when it was released, and his battles with the studio over his vision for the film are the stuff of lore, the film is now a cult classic. I would argue that Mr. Williamson tapped into an organic experimentalism that has always been at the core of hip-hop artistry. Juice is in the mix because you can't talk about hip-hop film without talking about Juice. And Ernest Dickerson, the film's director and co-writer, captured Tupac at his iconic big screen best. What cemented the inclusion of Juice is that Tupac, born in Brooklyn, raised in Baltimore, affiliated with Oakland's legendary Digital Underground, and a global icon, has special meaning and resonance for LA, who always claimed him as one of our own. I included the documentary Bastards of the Party because I wanted to go beyond the expected representation of gangsta rap and include something that instead grappled with the political policies and failures and socioeconomic realities that created the conditions for the music to be born. The film underscores how precarious life in LA has always been for the majority of Black people, and with the police state and an ambient anti-Blackness always bracketing our reality. Bastards of the Party gives us a larger historical perspective and context through which to consider the current moment in which we live. Brown Sugar taps into hip-hop's aspirational dreams. It's a sleek, feel-good, all-star hip-hop interpretation of the classic Hollywood romantic comedy. Part tongue-in-cheek War of the Sexes, part romanticized look at hip-hop media and the music industry, the film takes familiar tropes and filters them through hip-hop-inflected crossover dreams. We close the series by coming full circle, watching an Ava DuVernay documentary. My Mic Sounds Nice is an interesting time capsule because it documents a moment in hip-hop when the state of women rappers was especially shaky. Despite them having been a formidable presence in the culture from the start, the music industry had turned somewhat fickle toward its women artists. The women featured in the film pushed back against that, while also spinning an illuminating narrative on what it meant and cost to be a woman artist in hip-hop. I chose the film for that reason, but also because it's a perfect lead-in to our Missy Elliott tribute. Throughout her career, Missy has celebrated and uplifted other women, those who came before her as well as her peers. It seemed not just fitting, but important to have Miss DuVernay's film accompany Missy tribute, since the film and Missy are so perfectly aligned politically. Now I want to talk to you just a bit about This Is the Life. Before I do, I want to give you something of a historical framework. William Dixon was a British inventor who placed himself at the forefront of the birth of filmmaking. In 1894, he shot footage that some of you hip-hop scholars might be familiar with. It shows descendants of enslaved Black Americans doing part of a dance that had been done by the enslaved on plantations. I'm following that with a brief excerpt from a race film circa the 1940s, in which we see something similar. In both cases, we see the roots of breakdancing. Then I'm going to show you a clip of the gospel group The Jubilaires singing Noah. In the middle of it, we see something of the roots of rapping up before us. So we're going to play those clips now.
that's over and over. Oh, oh no, oh, oh no, I'm gonna ride on the winning tide, but it's a oh no, oh, oh no, oh no, I'm gonna ride on the winning tide. Brother Noah, my God's talking, said he would ride on the wind and tide. Hey, children, stop still and listen to me. God walked down to the brandy sea. He declared that the evil was the sin of man, and then he decided to destroy the land. He spoke to Noah. Noah stopped. He said, Noah, I want you to build me an ark. I want you to build it 3 cubits long. I want you to build it big and strong. I want it 50 high and 50 wide, so it will stand the wind and tide. It's oh Noah, oh Noah. Oh no, I got to go to ride on the winning tide, but it's a oh no, oh no, oh no, I got to go to ride on the winning tide. Got to go to ride on the winning tide. Got to go to ride on the winning tide. Oh Noah, brother Noah, my God's talking, said he would ride on the wind and tide. Well, after the foundation was laid, then Noah began to hew and build. The ringing of the hammer cried judgment, the hewing of the saw cried sin repent. 100 years he hammered and sawed, building the ark by the grace of God. When the ark was done, God's voice was heard. He said, now Noah, let me tell you what to do. Calling the animals 2 by 2, so he called them in the ark. 2 by 2, he called the birds, the ox with the kangaroo. Then he called and Jurassic, the ham and sham. Then God began to flood the land. He raised his hands to heaven on high, shook the stars and moon from the sky, shook the mountain, he troubled the sea, hit the wind to his chariot wheel. He stepped on land, stood on the shore, and declared that time there wouldn't be no more. But it's oh no, oh no, oh no, I got to go right on the winning tide.
Probably the most fun I had doing this whole series was just watching those clips over and over and over. I showed you those clips because they help illustrate why I'm somewhat ambivalent about this year being called the 50th anniversary of hip-hop. As cultural critic Danielle Smith points out in Chuck D's PBS documentary series, Fight the Power, How Hip-Hop Changed the World, quote, hip-hop is a part of a movement of black music that started in slavery. There's always been some kind of protest music. End of quote. I also showed you those clips because there's a bit of dancing shown in This Is the Life that harkens back to what we see in some of that early footage. And when we see Micah 9 singing in tonight's film, we should know that the marriage of singing and rapping has deep roots in Black American culture, as just illustrated by the Jubilaires. I also showed you the clips because in the last decade or more, there's been a disturbing trend toward erasing the fact that hip-hop at its core and root is Black American culture. There's no better example of this erasure than the recent press tour of Fat Joe and Busta Rhymes, where Busta Rhymes said, with his whole chest, that Black Americans have no culture, and that everything we have, we got from Caribbean and Latino cultures. Such foolishness would have once been laughed out of the room, but in the age of social media, it's taken hold and spread like an especially aggressive cancer. Coming from 2 men who have fed off Black American culture since day 1 of their careers, Busta's comment is especially egregious. Keep all that in mind when Fat Joe makes his appearance in tonight's film. Now I want to read you a brief excerpt from cultural critic Nelson George's recent essay, Remembering Jack the Rapper. Mr. Nelson writes, quote, with the coverage of hip-hop's 50th anniversary growing this year, my mind wandered back to what was considered rapping back before the explosion of Rapper's Delight in 1979. People cite The Last Poets or Gil Scott-Heron or even Pigmeat Markham, but my mind goes to a colorful character who went by the name Jack the Rapper, a.k.a. Jack Gibson. Jack's career went back to the earliest days of radio entertainment in the 1930s, when he was an actor on radio dramas out of his native Chicago. He is generally considered one of the first black announcers to bring street slang to the American airwaves while playing swing and bebop sides. In 1949, Jack moved from Chicago to Atlanta to join WERD, the first black-owned radio station in the United States, where he embraced the emerging sound of jump blues that eventually became widely known as rhythm and blues. He became the centerpiece of a group of early black DJs who called themselves the Original 13, who'd gather every year for drinking, gambling, and general debauchery. Using street slang, snappy patter, and sexual innuendo, these jocks created an air style of rhyme and jokes that was the template that early New York rappers pulled from in the 70s and into the early 80s. With names like Dr. Hepcat, Daddy-O, Honey Boy, and Jack the Rapper, these R&B radio announcers are the direct ancestors of the flashy names of hip-hop artists like Hollywood, Lovebug, and Curtis Blow. End of quote. I also love that the Atlanta radio station's call letters spell out word. I wanted to highlight Jack the Rapper for a number of reasons. One being that his radio handle and his on-air style both literally predate and predict rap as an art form. And we have to remember that the verb rap is lifted from common Black American vernacular of the 60s and 70s, as in, can I rap with you for a minute? Rap didn't just supplant the verb talk. It implied that something deeper, more layered, higher vibrational than simply talking was about to take place. But the excerpts I read also point to the practice and lineage of the kind of wordplay that is a centuries-old staple of Black American culture that was distilled into the art of Pigmeat Markham, Gil Scott-Heron, and the Last Poets, as well as the late Jack the Rapper. And to Mr. Nelson's list, I would also add the Watts Prophets. Jack the Rapper's influence on rap and hip-hop is little acknowledged outside deep, serious circles of hip-hop scholarship, and sometimes not even there. The artistic wordplay he set forth is at the foundation of the art and craft of the culture that is featured in tonight's film. Mr. George's essay illustrates the importance of this history being documented and passed forward. So does Ava DuVernay's This Is the Life, which is what I meant earlier when I said that every year that goes by, her film becomes more and more important. It's a beautiful, energetic, incredibly illuminating film, but it's also a pushback against a dumbed-down America. This means people of all races who feast on Black culture and then shit on or erase Black people. Early in the film, when speaking of the Good Life movement, Cut Chemist says, quote, "Something like that couldn't happen in any other city and any other part of the world at any other time. It was perfect." End of quote. I would argue that something like that couldn't even happen in this city anymore. There's a gorgeous moment in the film where LA hip-hop legend Medusa describes driving down Crenshaw Pass Exposition, seeing a throng of Black kids gathered, and immediately being intrigued by that gathering, pulling over to see what was happening. This moment reminds us that although LA was never a Black city in the manner of Detroit, Philly, Baltimore, or Oakland, it did have a large, vibrant Black community whose political and cultural innovations helped define the city. Black people once had footprints throughout LA, shaping and reshaping this place. But just as is happening in Chicago, the Bay, Detroit, New York, and Atlanta, among other places, our numbers are rapidly shrinking. In LA, they've already dwindled to a single-digit percentage of the population, with so much history already paved over and lost, and so much of the art and aesthetic forged by Black Angelenos now simply labeled LA style, with origin stories diluted and authorship unacknowledged. Much like what is now called Bay Area style is in truth Black style that was embraced and claimed by so many. So the film, in addition to being a layered, crucial document of the Good Life movement, is a bittersweet love letter to a Black LA that is fast fading. But the LA that is captured in the film is magnificent. One speaker after another acknowledges what is difficult and fucked up about living here, but we see such powerful resistance and creativity in the face of those difficulties. At the film's end, B. Hall points out that it's Black youth, that most imitated, scrutinized, demonized demographic who created and drove the culture. As you watch the film, really pay attention to how the scene got started, who started it, and why. Who saw a need and filled it? Who planted the seed and nurtured it? The setting of the Good Life Café itself has volumes of meaning. It speaks to a very specific Black politic and consciousness, and most crucially, how important it is to put those two factors into tangible action. As the film unfolds, we see the birth and evolution of a globally important movement, the rise and fall of artists, the cementing of icon status, the connection between Black mental health and creativity, how the music industry had no idea what to do with this pool of genius, even as assorted big-name rap stars leached off it, how this Black culture, as Black cultures and subcultures have always done, rolled out the welcome mat for people across racial and ethnic categories. And we see love and camaraderie that are inspiring to witness. It's clear that Ava DuVernay's tenure as a hip-hop artist, which we see in the film, has not only given her an in with interviewing the artist, but blessed her with real insight as to what is important for her camera to capture, what conversations to initiate and which ones to follow, and the importance of giving us a bounty of performance footage so the Good Life scene can make its own case for how dynamic and important it was and is. Ms. DuVernay brilliantly captures the vitality and energy of the scene and its participants, and I think in doing so, she also illustrates the way Black culture threads from the past into the future, feeding subsequent generations and iterations of art, and stoking similar reactions from audiences who engage them. I watched the archival footage in her film, and I feel like I'm seeing something of what early jazz clubs must have been like. In fact, Fat Jack and a few other people in the film explicitly make that very point, and that's Fat Jack, not Fat Joe, who does something else in the film. Because jazz has become a so-called high art, too often entombed and embalmed, we forget that it was once dance music, that the clubs were high energy and raucous, that there was playfulness and sexuality, intellectualism and irreverence, an appreciation for the artist that manifested through the physical and vocal response of the audience. So just in wrapping up, I wanted to say, I mentioned both Danielle Smith and Nelson George throughout my introduction. Please check out books by these two cultural critics if you're not familiar with them. They're amazing. You will learn so much. And I know for a fact the LA Public Library has them in stock. So before leaving the stage, I want to acknowledge someone in the audience, someone I used to follow around the city to see in concert, someone I interviewed a few times, and I was always dazzled by her presence. I remember once seeing her and her group Feline Science perform her classic Power of the P, and I can't remember if it was at the Roxy or someplace else, and she just annihilated the crowd. She's a rapper, an actress, an activist, a scholar, is still rocking the mic, and is an LA legend. So Medusa, would you please stand up and give the room a chance to show you some love? So I had a tip that Medusa would be here. Are there any other artists or anyone who's in the film in the audience tonight? If so, please stand up. Micah 9. Thank you. Thank you not only for being here, but thank you for your years of amazing, amazing art. And if you're not familiar with Medusa or Freestyle Fellowship, you're going to have your wig blown. It's just amazing, the footage that Ms. DuVernay has of them. And there's one other person in the audience. If Ms. Ava DuVernay would please come to the stage and just say a few words for us.
Thank you so much. This is a good one. Thank you.
Ernest Hardy. I mean, let's give him a round. Thank you to the whole team at The Hammer. And when I heard that Ernest Hardy was the curator for this, I got very excited because I'm a total fan. He was one of the early ones, and I know my family, Good Life family, knows very well that he was one of the few folks who covered us back then. Anybody remember LA Weekly? Okay, one of the few folks who covered us seriously at that time. I know he did this beautiful piece on Medusa, that beautiful feature and covers, and really just took the work as seriously as we took it at that time. This film was the first film that I ever made. Ever made. It started me on a road that I couldn't imagine. At the time, I didn't make it to do anything except to memorialize a time that was, at that point, the most beautiful time in my life. The time that I got to be an artist for the first time, surrounded by people who were free and creative and kind, and a family that I've never forgotten. And I'm so grateful that they allowed me to chronicle them and keep them on film, and so that we can all look back and remember the time that we had. Made it for $10,000, the whole film for $10,000. I would make it from check to check. I was working as a publicity kind of assistant at the time, and every time I would get my check, I'd put a little bit aside. Omid gave me all the footage. You'll see there's a brother in it who was always shooting. There were a few people who were always shooting, and there was footage under beds and in closets. I had to go to B+'s house, Brian Cross's house, and get a big dusty box of photos. I didn't know how to work a camera. I was, it was a ragtag thing. And so what you're going to see is very raw and very coarse and very rough around the edges and all heart. You'll see the subjects, who are my friends, they're talking to me. So when you see them get excited, we're having hours-long conversation about us. And so and artists talking about each other. And any documentary that I've gone on to make, 13th, or even My Mic Sounds Nice, I've never found a community of subjects who all knew each other so intimately and were so excited to talk about each other. And that was the thing that makes this so special. In the film, Brian Cross says a line that I have said on every single set I've ever been on, from When They See Us to Selma to Wrinkle in Time, to whatever I've made. When it gets intense, I always say, the best creativity happens within limits. He says it in the film, and I never forgot it from the moment he said it in front of my camera, because that's what this was. It was limitless, but it had limits, but we were limitless. On a small stage, which you'll hear all about, with the paintings in the background that we couldn't touch, all of the dynamics of the good life, if you were there, there were limits, but we felt like we could fly beyond those walls, and we did. The fact that L.A. Cool is here, you're going to hear all about him in this. The fact that Medusa is here, the fact that Micah 9 is here. You have three of the biggest stars in the film that are actually here. So when you all walk out, be ready to be mobbed. It always happens when we show the film. And lastly, I'll just say thank you to Ernest Hardy. He was the first Black critic who ever watched anything that I did, and not only gave it love, but gave me wings and gave me confidence that I should continue to make work. And so I'll always be grateful to Ernest Hardy. I'll leave by saying these are the fiercest artists that I've ever known, and I know a lot of artists from all over the world. And in many coffee shops and dining tables, wherever I am talking to people, I can be in Rome, I can be in Tokyo. Somehow I drop Good Life references, okay? I talk about my friends who taught me what art really was and what creativity really was. I'm so happy that the Hammer's given me an opportunity, and us an opportunity to share it with you. Last thing. I'm always surprised when I walk in a room and see anyone here. I do not know who you people are, okay? But I cannot believe you've come to see this 12-year-old film made for $10,000 by someone who didn't know how to make a movie. Thank you so much for wherever you came from for being here. It means a lot to all of us, and enjoy the picture. Thanks.